Welcome to the Across the Spoilerverse podcast. Ooh, we're getting creepy because it's Halloween. Everything's
Ooh.
getting dark. I'm joined from across the pond by Greg Alba. I feel like I'm the character in a horror movie who I'm talking to you on Skype. I'm just about to tell you something really important about the villain, and then the screen starts staticking, and I go, "Oh, someone's coming! I'm dead." But yeah, so if you can like the video, guys, that'd be a massive help. As always, we are on Spotify, Amazon Music, podcasts all around the globe. And yeah, Greg, how's it going? Good to see you again. It feels like, even though it's only a week, every time I think we both get up to so much during that week that by the time we see each other again, it's like it's been 5 months since I last seen you. How's life?
It's busy, man. Do I hear a little? Are you doing scary voice, or is there a tingle in your throat right now?
Oh, I've had a cold like really
No.
badly, and it was absolute. So, as many of you know, we get Loki episodes early, the first four anyway. So I've been preparing that. Had my script written, and recording it over the weekend was an absolute nightmare because I kept losing my voice. So I would record like a 5 minute chunk, lose it, and then have to spend the next 4 hours getting my voice up to scratch. Oh, and it's been a nightmare. If I can give you guys any advice out there, don't ever have twins. Yeah, because the amount of diseases they bring in, I feel like a broken record. But every couple of months, I'm literally, well, not even every couple of months. It's like every couple of weeks, I'm having to apologize for having a cold, and the listeners having to bear the brunt of it. Because I can't imagine it sounds nice. But I've been told it gets better after the
It
first year. It gets a bit better.
actually sounds appropriately soothing. It's got a little bit of
Yeah.
a baritone rasp to it. I enjoy it. I think it's nice on the ears, Paul.
I'll be getting them to cough in my face. I'm like, go on, make the voice sound better. Cough in my
I want,
face.
I want the sexy rasp. Go, just cough in my face.
So yeah, last week we talked about how the writers' strike had come to an end. We kind of went through all the deals that had been marked out, and our first story this week is that the SAG-AFTRA strike that they're going to negotiate this week. So negotiations, according to deadline, they started on Friday and have started up again today. And talks are apparently proceeding calmly. Greg, how are you feeling? I'm very optimistic about this. I don't think it'll take as long as last time.
I think your voice is doing magical wonders. I wasn't
Okay.
calm until you said that you're feeling calmly about it. And now I feel a lot more at ease about the preceding SAG negotiations. Your voice is doing just melts my spirit away. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think after the writer's strike, there's some hope. Granted, there's a lot of differences between what the writers are asking for and what the actors are asking for, but there's a lot of similarities. But I think the similarities do aid in making the negotiation process probably go faster for these things. And it also shows that the studios are serious, and it also shows that the studios are willing to play ball a little bit at least. And I guess the question is how much will they concede? You know, because there was quite a bit of capitulation, I would say, when it came to the writer strike. They got a little bit more than a lot of us expected them to, and will the SAG people be able to get as much as they want? But we'll see, man. We'll see. It'll be a good time. We've really got like an NPR thing going on today. I'm really enjoying it. I'm less about the visual of the camera and more about the audio now. It's really
Hmm.
enjoyable. I'm gonna just bring this a lot closer to my mouth today.
WGA. So yeah, obviously the WGA they secured a deal, and I feel that I don't feel like the studio can come in and be like, "Well, I know we agreed to all that stuff, but we're not agreeing to any of your things." I feel
Yeah.
like the sort of standards being set for where Hollywood are going to be at right now and what they kind of know they have to bring to the table. They can't just come in and be like, "Well, we're not doing any of that," because they've already agreed to stuff with the writers. So I'm hoping that they've just gone in and been like, "Oh, you know what? We're going to have to give them what they want." It's a 3 year contract at the end of the day. You know, it's not locking them in for. It's probably as long as most mobile phone contracts are these days. So I'm hoping that they just go in, get it sorted, and we can get back to business. It's a bit weird that they delayed Dune too, because I was like, I was fully expecting the strikes to be over, and if they are over, I think that'll be a massive mistake. Now, the big topic we'll be talking about later on in the podcast is some of the dumbest decisions ever made in Hollywood. So we're giving you a bit of a teaser there. We'll see if June 2 ranks up there, but I think moving it to March from November when I mean, it had all those IMAX screens, exclusive, very little competition. whereas March next year, it's pretty hectic. It's pretty hectic. I think there's a different big tentpole movie every other week. So we'll see how it goes. But there's been lots of striking developments across the industry as well, as VFX workers at Disney have voted unanimously to unionize. So lots of things could be happening there. I mean, imagine if we get out of these two strikes and then the VFX artists go on strike as well. It'd just be,
Oh
it's a bad
man,
time in Hollywood.
those delays. And I think the VFX artists, especially at Disney, because they've gotten a lot of criticism. However, they've gotten a lot of criticism, but a lot has been pulled out from behind the wall to show us that it's because there's a lot of like cracking the whip, a lot of last minute changes, a lot of burnout, a lot of overworked hours. There's a lot of variables that work against VFX workers. And I think when you look at the effects of something like, um, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there was a time when people were talking about the VFX work in Disney and then really complaining about it. And then they found out why it can be not looking the greatest, right? But then when you see something
Yeah.
like Ahsoka where it looks really great and or for the most part, or and then even looking at Loki, that like, oh wow, so much of this looks so great. Then I think you get even more people behind the VFX workers going, this is why you should really pay them properly. This is why you should take care of them because look what happens when they're allowed to do good work. So I'm
Yeah,
in full support of them, man.
100% agree. I mean, it's such a hard job doing VFX work, and that often their designs get scrapped and thrown away. They'll work on whole sequences, everything will get nailed down, and then the director or the studio will be like, actually, can you change this bit? And they'll have to rework the entire thing, and there's lots of crunch time involved in it. It's a very, very talented position, and I often see things where people post screenshots or clips from movies from 10 years ago and say, how come the VFX looks so much better then than they do now? And it's not because the artists are less talented. It's because the way the studio is running things now and overworking them and not giving them enough time to do things. And when you look at movies today compared to how they were even 10 years ago, they're almost like animated movies at this point. For
Yeah,
example, if you ever see a behind the scene, if you watch the behind the scenes stuff of say Iron Man or the Avengers, where everyone says, "Oh, the VFX are still hold up in this stuff," a lot of it's on set, and
exactly.
they're using real backgrounds, real sets, and so on. So that's not having to be animated. Whereas if you look at films now, behind the scenes, it's all pretty much green screen and blue screen in the background. So
Like
all
Quantumanium.
that's got to get animated, all that's got to get put together, and then on top of that, you have to provide the figures and stuff. So
Yeah,
they're pretty much making animated movies at this point that just have actors moving around the spaces
yeah.
and stuff, and it's so much more work. And yeah, just the way things are shot. The Creator is a great example of how to do VFX properly, which is they nailed down the final cut of the film before they ever sent it off
Mhm.
to have VFX work on it. I feel that's the way you should kind of be looking at doing
Definitely.
stuff. Obviously, it's not you are gonna have change. Like I'll work on a video and see something and be like, oh, I wish I could change that. And I can imagine a film where you've been working on it for years and years, you'll see something where you go, well, can't we do this instead? But yeah, it's a strange time, and we've also seen some repercussions from the writers' strike, as the writers of Drew Barrymore's show, they've declined to return to the series after she attempted to scab apparently and continue the show without them.
This is what we were talking about, man. It was like this decision was terrible because you weren't thinking about the long term repercussions of what could happen with this. It's like, yeah, you want to make sure your celebrity talent is willing to agree on this show first and foremost, and you don't want to have the scab angle behind that. But then B is like, well, dude, you also got to think about when the writer's strike is done, are your writers going to want to return after this? Whether or not you were in agreement with Drew Barrymore willing to return or not, that doesn't really matter. It was always about the optics, and it was also about the way her writers were feeling. Like this is terrible for her. This is really bad. And sure, they'll be able to find some other writers. I believe they will be, but I think a lot of people would not feel like they would want to publicize that they're part of the Drew Barrymore show after something like this. I think this is really
Yeah.
This is really troubling. Turbulent times at the Drew Barrymore show.
I'm quite surprised she wasn't part of, or isn't part of SAG, to be honest. I would have thought, I mean, she's
She's
obviously,
not part of SAG?
well, no, but like, why? I'm guessing she is. So I'm
Yeah.
obviously they're on strike. So she must know people involved in the strike, and that must be affecting her as well. I know a talk show host is different, but I'm guessing she's still part of SAG. Um, so yeah, it's a bit strange that she kind of took that position in the first place. I would have thought her being an actor would have been like, oh, we stand with the writers and the actors, but guess not. But yeah, the strikes have obviously, had their knock-on effect, which takes us into our next topic. We're flying through them today, Greg.
Oh,
It's
dude.
Marvel
Well,
delays. Yeah.
you're calm and collected. You're smooth. I love the way you were handling the transitions. There's a lot of, which
Mm.
takes us into the next topic. There's a lot of pre-planning here. I think this is a really well structured podcast today.
Too structured. Like, I've been in bed all week. No, I haven't. The worst thing is when you're a YouTuber, gang. I know we're very lucky to be in this position, but it's talking about movies all day. But the bad thing is when you're ill, you just got to work through it, mate. You've just got to work through it.
Oh
What do you
yeah,
mean
man.
you also have to work through it because you have a proper job listening right now? I'm sorry, guys. You know what I'm saying. Um,
No one's more self-absorbed than YouTubers. All right, well,
yeah,
no one,
100%.
no one feels they have the hardest time in the world than you. It's because
Yeah.
I think it's because we subjugate ourselves to people's opinions about us. So I think we just let it weigh on us. But let's talk about these Marvel delays, man.
No, honestly, Greg, I remember I was at a wedding once and I was sat talking to this woman and she was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a YouTuber." She's like, "Oh, how's that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's blah, blah, blah. It's not all it's cracked up to be. There's lots of hard times sitting around making videos, talking about Marvel movies and pointing out Easter eggs. It's so difficult." And I was like, "And what do you do?" And she was like, "Oh, I worked as a frontline nurse during the pandemic, and
Oh,
my heart sank, and I was like, oh, you know what? I'm very lucky. There's people actually doing really hard work out there, and hopefully enjoying it with a lovely podcast that they can listen to. Because I know some of
man.
you guys are getting paid right now to listen to podcasts. So you cheeky
Yeah.
little monkey, you.
We're helping. We're making the time fly. We are a necessity part of you getting away from your hard life for just one solid hour as you want to hear about what's going on with Marvel delays.
Yeah.
I'm bringing us back. What did the Cosmic Circus say, Paul?
Yeah, so the Cosmic Circus put out a report saying, according to the US Copyright Office, which was actually this report was found with Scarlet Witch updates. The
Nice.
Agatha show is expected to release September 29th, 2024. In addition,
Wow.
they also found out Daredevil's listed as expected to release January 2025,
Oh,
and
man.
Ironheart's expected to release September 3rd, 2025.
I can't wait to commit my birthday to Iron as my birthday. Yay.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's going to be a good birthday
Well, if
week.
it makes you feel better, that date's not locked in, and I'm guessing it's going to get delayed. But I went back to the original slate that they posted in July 2022 last
Mm-hmm.
year. So summer 2023 was supposed to be Echo. Loki season 2 was supposed to be summer 2023. The Marvels, that was meant to be July 28th, 2023. November 3rd, Greg, was going to be Blade. Fall
Wow.
2023 was going to be Ironheart. Then winter 2023 was Agatha. Spring 2024 was Daredevil. And then we go into Captain America and the Thunderbolts. So it's insane when you think about how much this stuff's been delayed. And I looked it up. And Ironheart actually wrapped production in November 2022. So by the time it releases in September 2025, it's going to be 2 years since they finished filming it,
Wow.
which is absolutely insane. Like you think about how tight Marvel used to be, and they had everything in place and worked out, and I think it's just insane that it's been delayed that much. Now, when I brought this up, people were saying like, because it's woke and it's crap and stuff, and I don't know if
Sure.
that's the case, mate. You've not seen it, um, but it's just insane how much mismanagement there almost is in Hollywood at the moment, and for it to finish production and be 2 years behind. I mean, I know they said they were delaying Marvel projects, But wow, that is crazy. I
I
think they've
wonder.
just hit a point where they've thought we really need to reassess what we're doing because not everything's hitting it out the park. And I mean, when was the last $1 billion MCU film? And that used to be a given. Obviously, the pandemic's affected it, but
Even the conversation surrounding Loki season 2 seems like the show is not as big as a lot of people expected it to be. I see it on the especially in the breakdown community. I even thought our reaction for it would be significantly bigger, considering the level of hype and how well received Loki season 1 was as well. And it does make you kind of wonder about, hey, is it actually? Paul started changing something on the Google Doc while I was talking, and I was like, "What is he doing?" And now I'm like, "Oh, I didn't realize Paul could change this Google Doc in real time, all the way in the UK before my eyes."
sponsored by Google Docs.
So, yeah, no, but it's it is making me wonder if like spreading it out is probably part of their strategy. Actually, I don't really know how this ties into what I was saying with Loki season 2, but I think showcasing a little bit of damage brand could be applicable with the how Loki season 2 is not as big as a lot of us thought it would be in terms of numbers, despite how well received it is right now.
I mean, it's week one.
It is week one. Still, it's Loki season 2, though. Really thought it would. I think a lot of us thought it would be like She-Hulk episode 1 got bigger numbers than than Loki season 2 did. Um, the 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 thing with Disney Plus that a lot of people are often talking about, like this week, I think they have like Goosebumps that is simultaneously debuting with Hulu. There's not much hype around that. They try to get hype around other things, but the only things that really get hype are their Star Wars and Marvel properties. And I think when you spread them out like this for the stuff that's going to be Disney Plus exclusive, it does kind of force you to stay subscribed if you do really care to be, a part of the journey when it comes to the Marvel and Star Wars exclusive content that goes on Disney Plus. So I think this could be in conjunction with part of that strategy. That's just a theory. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a sound theory because that's a really massive delay. You know,
Yeah, I feel with in the case of Ironheart, I feel like it's a mistake, and that is because obviously, Ironheart was introduced during Wakanda Forever.
Wakanda Forever. Yeah,
Yeah, and I feel like it's just a bit too much of a delay almost to stay interested in that character or to at least, strike while the iron's hot. And I feel that's the same with Agatha
I
as well.
I
Daredevil, I
need
think there's always sort of that hype around him, so they can kind of get away with it. But Agatha and Ironheart, especially, I think you needed maybe bring it in closer and yeah, just drop it more closer to One Division and Wakanda Forever to really, get the hype. Because by the time, like Agatha, let's be honest, was pretty much greenlit off the fact that Agatha All Along song did really well on Spotify.
hell yeah.
That was like 2 years ago now, and it's going to be about 3 years. I don't know if that song's got enough staying power for people to be like, okay, I know we didn't care about Loki, but we're coming back for that. So very, very strange tactic. I think obviously that they've seen their numbers dwindle and they've realized that dropping too much content kind of robs people of anticipation because you're getting it all the time and you just sort of need a gap in between stuff to really
You
build
need
up
the
hype and
build.
fever for something.
You need the
Yeah.
tension build. Sexual
So
build is what you need.
yeah, I don't think it's indicative of the quality of these shows per se. I just think it's more sort of. I mean, we do constantly complain as well that Disney need to listen to fans and whatever. And though I don't feel Star Wars fully does that, I feel Marvel at least pays attention to fans and is like, okay, we're getting enough feedback from this to kind of realize where we've gone wrong.
Yeah.
Blade's also been delayed. Apparently, they're writing a new script for it. I mean, that movie's been in development hell almost. Like the amount of things I've heard about it behind the scenes of it being, starring Dane Whitman and then not in the next draft and then being about his daughter and then not in the next draft. And yeah, it just kind of sounds all over the place a bit with that. But I'm happy to wait if stuff's good.
You bring up stuff so much that I forget. Like so much has happened in the last few years with Marvel, I honestly forget about some, even Agatha All Along. I haven't thought about that since WandaVision was on air. I'm like, oh yeah, that was the talk when that song was out. Everyone was talking. I mean, WandaVision in general was the talk. And then you're mentioning Blade. Like, oh yeah, crap! There was this whole thing where they announced Mahershala Ali, and it was this huge deal. And then he was teased at the end of Eternals. He was actually in the post-credit scene. It's just kind of nuts when you think about just how much has
Yeah.
happened. And like, oh yeah, this happened, and you forget about it. And I do wonder if that has factored into the Loki season 2 effect, because we all really thought that Loki season 1 had the massive consequential catalyst into what will be the multiverse saga, right? Like going into Doctor Strange and all that, and we're going to see how Loki season two's cataclysmic events will ultimately ripple through the preceding Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we didn't really see that effect. So I'm kind of wondering if people are really at that point where they feel like, maybe Loki season 2 is maybe inconsequential or not as necessary to really
Yeah.
experience it.
And I feel like that's the case in general with all these Disney Plus shows. Not all of them. There are some that are consequential, but I think people have kind of got wise to them not fully mattering. Or if they do, then it's like years down the line, and they're not in a rush to watch it. The way I would compare it to is, Marvel are a comic book company. Obviously, they have hundreds of titles where it's side characters that get their own runs, and you know what I'm saying, Greg. You
Dude,
don't
I
just
get
have
you, man.
yeah, you don't just have your Avengers comic, Iron Man comic, and Captain America comic. Whereas with the movies, you would have those ones, and I think they've kind of tried to go often into the comic model, where it's almost like give every hero a show, and everyone who seems interested in something will give them a series or include them in other
Mhm.
stuff. And I'm sure with comics yourself, you don't like. I love reading comics, but I don't pick up every single
God,
issue about every single other character
no.
to stay on top of stuff. And I tend to just read the main massive arcs. And I kind of feel that's going to be the same with the general audience too, where they're going to come in for the massive movies, your Avengers. And I'm really surprised they haven't done an Avengers movie since Endgame. That I feel that that's a missed opportunity there. I think that would have got a lot of people invested in, rather than having these dwindling numbers. It would have been like, oh well, we need to get caught up to this stuff because an
Yeah.
Avengers movie's coming. But all that to the side, I feel the general audience is going to pay attention to the big names, but not necessarily the smaller ones, and that might fracture down to some shows being missed. Again, we are in episode 1 of Loki
Yeah.
season 2. I personally believe it will pick up. I think from what I've read on
Word
the
of mouth.
reviews and stuff, people have said that there's good stuff coming, and I don't want to skip ahead
Mm.
and spoil it for myself, but I do feel that the audience will get there, and that is something that we see with a lot of Disney Plus shows as well. The
Yeah.
first week it's okay, and then it gets good word of mouth, and then the numbers just build and build and build. For example, Ahsoka, I don't think we've had the numbers for episode 4 or 5 yet with Anakin in, but I can imagine those episodes were quite big because
Oh
I
yeah.
remember them trending, and obviously the stuff that happened in it. And I can see a similar sort of thing happening with Loki as well.
I hope so. I hope so. I hear a puppy. I hear a
Yeah,
puppy in the background. I love a good
it'd be
puppy. The
be Amazon
uh, uh,
dropping stuff off for me.
oh, there you go. I think, yeah. I mean, to kind of like wrap it up on this point, I heard your best friend Ryan Airy and your worst enemy Ryan Airy. He said something that was, I think, it was along the lines of Ahsoka. He feels like could have been wrapped up in an opening crawl. What happened in that show, that you don't really need to watch it. That you can kind of just explain the events in an opening crawl. And that is when it makes me think of what you were saying with comic books. Like, a lot of times I don't read this. I won't read the side runs because they usually can just sort of explain what happened really quick in a text. And that's kind of the problem that happens with a lot of the Marvel properties as well. Is unless you really want to catch like specific Easter eggs and whatnot, like the Marvels is coming out, but I'm really under the impression that I actually don't need to watch, even though I have seen them. I don't feel like I actually need to have seen Miss Marvel or WandaVision because they could probably quickly explain to me what I need to know. And they do a good job at that. So it actually, because that's part of the weird thing with Marvel and thinking about the Marvels, which is putting together three different specific properties: WandaVision, Miss Marvel, and Captain Marvel. That you you want to make sure that if they didn't see the shows, that people can still enjoy the movie and keep up with the movie. At the same time, because they structure their movies like that, it can make people go, well, I don't need to watch the shows. I don't need to watch WandaVision. I don't need to watch Miss Marvel. And that kind of attitude just kind of bleeds over into a lot of Marvel now of, do I really need to watch it? Where before everything felt like it needed to be watched. And I think that's kind of the problem when they just, because at first the idea of doing television shows sounded like the greatest prospect for Marvel. It's kind of like awesome. Like, oh, we finally get some real exploration. And at first, it was amazing. You know, WandaVision, Loki. I even really like Falcon and Winter Soldier. Enjoy Moon Knight. There's a lot of great things that have come from the Disney Plus side of television, but the commitment level that you ask for from audiences on that scale is it's a much that's much tall big that's a much bigger order to ask. You know, and the fact that you can sort of explain away a lot of things that happen if when you're doing crossovers with just essentially the idea of an opening crawl, but just in a few sentences on screen. But that's because you couldn't really do that with Ahsoka. With a lot of people were still kind of lost on the characters of like the significance of like Ezra Bridger and whatnot. That a lot of that information would come late. But Marvel, they are in this weird hole right now where a lot of their stuff
Yeah.
doesn't feel as necessary when that was probably their main driving force was how it felt like necessary viewing. And now the brand is more damaged than ever because a lot of their stuff does not necessitate viewing. I feel it does because I like to get all the details and whatever, and I like the journey and
Yeah.
the experience. But for most audiences, it shows in the numbers. The numbers show that.
Yeah. I mean, I would watch it either way. I love this stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah, like with Ahsoka and Rebels, that was another example where it was kind of like I feel like not that many people went back and watched through Rebels to get caught up with Ahsoka, and there were some parts here and there. Obviously, it enhanced your enjoyment if you knew that stuff, but I feel that's the same with the films, and they have to kind of be aware that people aren't gonna have watched the show, so they have to make them newcomer friendly as well. It's a really weird place to be in. But as a fan, I still like this stuff. I'm still invested in it. I know I get called a hater all the time and stuff, but it is kind of sad when you see something you love that was so beloved by so many people not getting the love or admiration that it used to. And I kind of feel like on some things it's lost its way, which is why I was so excited for Loki. And yeah, the
yeah.
numbers have kind of been all over the place on it. We will see what they are officially, but just you honestly, the whole week was just YouTubers messaging me going, your Loki view's doing well. Is it doing well in the video? And I was like, it's doing not. It's fine. It's okay. It's worse than She Hulk. And he was like, yeah, it's doing worse than She Hulk for me. And I was like, okay, I'm fine though. Don't worry. Are you okay? And he was like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. It's like it's gonna be a long 6 weeks, mate. Yeah, no, could not afford to buy my children coffee for Christmas or something. I don't know why. I don't know why I brought up coffee for Christmas, but you know what I mean. But we'll
Who are
be
these
okay, guys.
elderly YouTubers that you're you're friends with?
Me? Yeah, me by the looks of it these days. I'm like 35 years old. Jeez. Ryan Airy's about 50 years old, mate. Don't tell him I
Oh, it
said that.
shows.
Yeah. So,
Did we
well,
cut
that's why
that?
he puts it all on the dog.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Marvel, I thought we'd do a quick little discussion about Loki episode 2.
Sure.
I enjoyed it. Have you
I
seen it?
didn't. Yeah, I didn't. I really enjoyed it too. I didn't love it to the
Yeah.
degree of the first episode. Um,
Yeah.
there's a bit of there's a bit of is you you actually messaged me. You're like, hey, is something right about this episode? And I didn't know what you were talking about. And I feel like Is it a spoiler to mention what you were asking? Because I felt it was
It's the way it
the,
begins.
the first like 5 seconds. It was jarring to me too. I had to question it of like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And and because of that, it does feel like they there's some stuff that feels like they rush past it. It's kind of weird. Like there's a lot of great scene work still. I think there's some amazing scene work here. The acting is top notch. Directing, cinematography, still really top notch. But there is some weird pacing things and some stuff that probably didn't need to be as gestated on for as long. And then other parts feel rushed. It's not as crisp or solid. I still like it. I'm still invested. But yeah, like the first one was just so like exciting and and visually impressive and like whoa weird. And this one really it speeds up, but then it really pushes the brakes.
Yeah,
It's weird to talk about without going into specifics. It's not as strong.
I would say it's the mirror image of episode 2 from season 1. And by that I mean it's about some characters meeting up with other characters. We know they're going to meet up. McDonald's spoiled the entire scene. If you know that, then you know what I'm talking about. Um, and it's kind of going through the motions to get to that point. Almost, it's one of those episodes where it's like, well, we know these characters have to meet up at the end. How are we going to present that in a way that feels natural and fluid? And it's just kind of going through that now that can be a problem, but where I think it excels at is in the execution of it. And there's some really good moments that they have with certain characters, especially Loki. Throughout Loki, we've seen him kind of doing maybe anti-hero stuff, but he's never out and out being a full-on villain that he once was. And in this episode, he does some villainous stuff where it's like, oh, I can see that, and we really get to see Tom Hiddleston kind of flexes his villain stuff. It ends in a quite a climactic, well, not climactic, but there's consequences to it, and it's sort of a reverse of season 1, episode 2. And when you see the episode, that might make sense. I'll explain it to you.
I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think that.
Yeah,
I did not even think about that. But you're 100% right. I will say too, Owen Wilson's work in this episode, really strong stuff. I love what there's another character in there. I don't want to. Yeah, it's so hard not to spoil stuff. There's another character there who I was like, oh, I didn't realize this character would be so prominent. But Owen Wilson and him have some of the most memorable stuff out of Loki for me. I
yeah,
really love their scene work together.
yeah.
Again, it's like
There's
solid scene work. Like the scene where the acting is impeccable, man. It's really, really just that's the interesting thing is it becomes a little bit more like it's something that you kind of want. It becomes less like big world building and a little and it does zero in more on the characters. And sometimes that does mess with a little bit of plotting. But I still think it's better than a lot of other things we've been getting, like by a lot, you know.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to say basically. It's if you wrote down what happened in the episode and sent it to someone, they'd be like, didn't really sound that good. But it's the way they execute it and carry it
Mhm.
out. It's not I personally didn't enjoy it as much as the first episode, but I feel it was definitely executed well. And as far as episode 2 in a season, like in across pretty much every single TV show of all time, episode 2 is always kind of the step down because they get a big budget for the show. They put most of it into the pilot, and then the second episode's when they kind of have to tone back and maybe set things up for what's going to be coming in the episodes down the line. Like episode 1 of a season, I always find is kind of almost self-contained. Like it has a middle, beginning, and well, beginning, middle, and end, or middle, beginning, and end with Loki
Has
doing
a
time
middle,
travel stuff.
beginning, and an end.
But yeah, yeah. So it's episode ones are normally outstanding. They put everything they can into it because they want the show to get a big audience behind it. Talk about how good it is, and then episode 2 is normally sort of a step down, and then it's like episode 4 where stuff really kicks off. I feel it was your classic sort of episode 2 thing where it's a slight step back. You're getting more centralized character performances, but the work there is really good. It's just
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, I'd say episode 1 was like a 5 out of 5, and this is like a 4 out of 5, if that
I
makes
think
sense.
I think that that part that brings it down to a 4 out of 5 is just a little more strongly felt because episode 1 was so good. You know what I mean? Like if episode 1 wasn't as great as it was, I don't think there would be because it's the weird part. Like it's still a really good episode. It's just that part that is a step down, you feel it a little stronger only because you're coming off of how great. So I think actually like putting that out there would help because now that we put that out there, people might lower their expectations and they go and like, I don't know what you're talking about. That was better than episode 1 because we lowered, how
Yeah.
it goes because we lowered the expectations.
Still a really good show, though. But
Definitely.
speaking of lowering expectations, The Exorcist Believer, well, there's been loads of stuff coming out about it this week. So it turns out that Universal actually spent $400 million to acquire the rights to the release of it so they could make a new trilogy. It's come out. It's not done well. It's done pretty badly. They're expecting a 28 million debut, and yeah, it's not going well. I didn't go see it, Greg. I was on the edge of it. I was like, do I go? Do I not go? And then they posted a clip online of a line from it, and I was just like, I'm gonna give it a miss. So
Well, it got terrible reviews and a terrible audience score. So there's going to be no
yeah,
legs on this movie. It's really bad.
and Scott Mendelson actually brought up a really good point talking about the whole $400 million for the rights thing. Obviously, Universal, they've tried to capture lightning in a bottle again, like they did with Halloween, that first Halloween requel, where they got David Gordon Green in, they got
Mm-hmm.
legacy characters from the franchise, and they just hit the ground running with it. So Mendelsohn was saying that Exorcist, it's not Halloween in terms of IP. For example, he brought up having
Mm-hmm.
Ellen Burstyn come back. It's not the same as bringing back Jamie Lee Curtis fighting Michael Myers again.
Completely agree.
And yeah, The Exorcist just I one of the greatest movies of all time. I think that first film. It's not just one of the best horrors of all time. It's one of the best movies of all time. But the sequels and what followed it, they don't have the legacy that the Halloween sequels do. I mean, how many times have they rebooted the Halloween universe? There's been like so many different timelines, remakes,
Yeah.
requels that ignore all the
Well,
sequels and stuff like that.
Laurie
And
Strode's a legacy character, whereas Ellen Burstyn's was, I wouldn't call her like a legacy. It's a major character, but it's just not the same level where she carried through the franchise.
yeah, and I think they really tried to just think, how do we do that again? We
Mm-hmm.
buy The Exorcist for 400 million from Morgan Creek, who must be laughing about it, rolling in pools of money. We get David Gordon Green back. We get a legacy character back. We make it a direct sequel to the first film. Kind of ignore the other sequels, and yeah, it just didn't work out for them. I think something that we talk about quite a lot on this show is horror movies and how cheap they are to make. And if you're paying 400 million out the gate, I don't think you're ever going to make that back, unless it's like a massive, massive hit.
Because that was just for the rights. That was just to get the yeah, like damn, that's a
So,
lot.
so that's before they've ever shot anything, before they've ever sat down and cast anyone or wrote a line of dialogue. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I think they just needed to really analyze the situation and see what was going on. Like, I mean, The Exorcist was so much of a cultural movement at the time as well. It was
Mhm.
very much a sort of test your faith film where a lot of people, like we've talked about this in the case of Sound of Freedom and stuff, where when the church backs a film, it gets so much more money. For example, something like Passion of the Christ or something. Lots
Mhm.
of people come out to see it. And this was obviously set in the 70s before all the Catholic Church scandals and stuff like that. And religion was really, really a bankable thing. And going to see a movie where it's about the devil possessing a girl, it's almost testing your faith. And I feel The Exorcist will have renewed a lot of people's faith as well. So it was very much a cultural thing, sort of, can you survive the movie about the devil? You hear about all the curses and stuff. Back then, mind blowing, crazy thing, insane. These days, there's hundreds of possession movies. And yeah, it paying that
We just
much money
we
for
had
that,
the
insane.
Pope's Exorcist this year.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's so overdone. Obviously, the The Exorcist was such a big film. I think it got 10 Oscar nominations or something, and one of those
Mhm.
was Best Picture. And people have just been trying to redo that and live up to that again, and it's not going to happen. And I think getting David Gordon Green on board was just stupid anyway.
The
And
second I
from what
heard
I've heard,
that, yeah, I was like, "Dude, you don't wanna get a guy who's, like, over this shit." It's like, I think John Watts leaving Fantastic Four was so smart of him to do that. You know, like, I
yeah,
can't imagine going from Spider-Man to it's like David Yates did all the freaking Harry Potter movies. And he's like, "Alright, I guess I'll do Fantastic Beasts now." You know, like, you're
yeah,
just gonna and while I actually like that first movie, you're just gonna lose that magic touch. Your passion gets diluted over time. You know, like, oh god, I got to start this all over again. I gotta try. He should have probably done something more in between before just making the jump to be
yeah,
a producer director essentially. Like, all right, I'll get this going. you know,
yeah. And just hearing all this stuff this weekend, it put me off wanting to see it. There's obviously audience members that didn't go to see it either because the movie's not made that much. But it kind of takes us into our main topic of the show, which, obviously, The Exorcist, the rights to it cost $400 million before they made anything. So put out a tweet asking, what are the dumbest decisions in Hollywood that there's ever been in Hollywood? What dumb decisions have Hollywood people made? So we're going to avoid controversial subjects like John Landis causing the death of the actor from the Twilight Zone and those two kids on that set. Interestingly, me and Philip Molina, we've actually done a podcast breaking down at that, but it's not out because it's taken forever to edit. But it's a very messed up story, and yeah, it's a horrendous story and what happened on that. But we're not going to say stuff like that because it's obvious it's a given. So what the stuff's going to be like is like sewing up Deadpool's mouth in
yeah.
X-Men Wolverine Origins. You know what I mean? Just stupid stuff like that. We'll keep it light-hearted, guys. I know it's been a bad week in the world. We don't want to delve into nasty, nasty, nasty things. But I put out a tweet saying, "What are the dumbest things and dumbest decisions in Hollywood?" And for me, right, one of the most dumbest ones was when John Carpenter, Kurt Russell, and Keith David, they were all on board for a Thing sequel, and then Universal, instead of going with a prequel, they decided to get someone who'd never directed a Hollywood movie before, and then they replaced all the practical effects with CGI. Now that
I
was insane to me.
I had no idea about that until I saw your tweet.
Yeah,
That is nuts to
insane.
me. That is absolutely absurd. Because and John Carpenter wanted to come back to write and to direct that one at least.
Yeah. No, he was going to work on the script. They were going to get the team back, set after that first film, get everyone back, everyone's on board, and then Universal's like, nah, we're going to go with the guys who did the Dawn of the Dead remake because
That's crazy.
they made
I
us
do
some
wonder
money.
if it would have been good though, because John Carpenter did start to really lose his touch after a certain point. You know, and I think it would have been more exciting because the thing is, it's still like when you have the prequel that they made, which I know you did coverage on recently. When you have the prequel that they made, it it does not actually affect. It just elevates. It just makes the original thing from the '80s just that much better. It just made it
Yeah,
stronger. Where it's not that if John Carpenter and them did one and then it failed, I don't think it would have negatively affected it. However, it still makes it that much more special that they didn't even touch it again, and they keeping that ending ambiguous, sort of be ponderous about it. Like you've had some very successful videos really breaking down what really happened at the very end of that movie. It would have been more exciting. I would have obviously. I think more people would have tuned in for that, but I do have to question whether or not like Martin Scorsese seems like he has not lost his touch the older he has gotten. Like
yeah,
Killers of the Flower Moon. I was going through Rotten Tomatoes, phenomenal reviews right now, he's consistently. Whereas John Carpenter really did start to lose his touch, but it would have been cool. To not gonna lie,
yeah.
it would have been
Well,
cool though. That alt universe sounds really cool.
The thing is, though, pun not intended, he's obviously had ideas for sequels rattling around in his head since the 80s, so I think it would have been good. I would have liked to have seen it anyway. Obviously, he was involved with the game, which is that's considered canon. He actually plays a character in that. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen that. And another one that ties in with The Exorcist is we talked about this last week. So the Exorcist prequel, they originally shot The Exorcist Dominion,
Hmm.
and it was pretty much the same script. They went in, shot everything, fully finished the film, and then realized we don't actually like it that much. So they then went back, reshot everything from scratch, and called it Exorcist the prequel or something stupid. It's such a weird story. They then released that. People didn't like it, so they then released the original thing they shot, which people also didn't like. Surprisingly,
Dude, um, can I throw mine in there? The one that I immediately, the second you brought up this topic, there was one that just sprung to mind right away. I just sent you a photo of it. So, like, still holding out hope, Paul. The Dark Universe. I think
mm,
the Dark Universe is one of the most fascinating times in cinema that we have ever lived through. I'm still so fascinated by it because they it was so much premature thinking with that movie. If you guys don't remember what it is, so is 2017, if I'm not mistaken, and they decide they're going to launch the Dark Universe, which would be like the classic monster films being brought to life with modern day things like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, launching it with The Mummy with Tom Cruise in The Mummy. So they wanted to do all these films, and they had this big cast photo that they put together showing we already got the talent for it. Johnny Depp, Javier Bardem as Frankenstein's monster, Russell Crowe as Jekyll and Hyde, Angelina Jolie as Bride of Frankenstein. Um, I think they wanted to carry over Luke Evans' drive. I could be wrong about that, but I think they might have wanted to carry over Luke Evans. Regardless, even if you take Luke Evans out, you have all those other people, right? These big celebrities that they're putting front and center. And then even when you watch The Mummy, they had they had a whole cheap ass logo for it and everything. Dark Universe is
yeah,
launch for it. And it was it was at least DC. They keep trying, they launch a universe and they keep trying to keep it going. Whereas Dark Universe it died right away. It even ends with it because the trailers are showing that like Tom Cruise versus the Mummy. They didn't tell you that he was going to become the Mummy, which was hilarious.
mm.
And so much went wrong with that one movie. It's not a good movie. Uh, I mean, I laugh at it when I'm not gonna lie. I had fun when I watched it, but I can gladly acknowledge it is not a good movie.
I've never walked out of a movie in my life before. Never understood people who do it. First 10 minutes in, I literally looked at my wife and was like, "I feel like I'm gonna walk out. I feel like I'm gonna walk out." And she went, "No, just stay, just stay." And no, I could up until that point, I could never understand why people walked out of movies. And I was watching it thinking, "I'm gonna walk out, I'm gonna walk out." And I've seen some shit in my life, Greg. I've seen some
This
bloody shit in my life.
it treats its audience like it's stupid. It constantly is like I only saw it once, but I just remember how they just kept repeating itself like you got to tell the audience what we're doing. You got to tell the audience what we're doing, and then their setup for their universe was so ham-fisted. It just felt we talk about like committee made and corporate made and this was just all over the screen with it. And then you could also feel like probably the clash of studio and Tom Cruise producer mentality kicking in as like it's just not a good blend of a film. And then it just completely killed this Dark Universe. And Dark Universe, in a lot of ways, the classic monster films were the first cinematic universe to grace the silver screen. The crossovers with Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and Wolfman way back in the
Wolfman.
black and white days, man. It was like the first time we ever had cinematic universe crossovers, if I'm not mistaken. So this should have been a slam dunk, but they wanted to turn it into some like weird superhero franchise instead of embracing that this should be a monster verse. This should be not the monster, you know what I mean? It should be a monster, like monster movie cinematic universe, but they were going for some like action, horror adjacent thingy. It was really. I mean, I'm glad it died. It allowed us to get Invisible Man, which is great because Invisible Man is an awesome movie. The Lee Wanell film. The same thing like how you brought up with like Deadpool. You know, that was one of the worst decisions I think in history too of what they did with Ryan Reynolds sewing his mouth shut. And but it allowed us to get the Deadpool franchise, and the Deadpool franchise often riffs off of that terrible decision that happened. So sometimes there's a blessing in disguise for some of these choices.
Lots of people said the Dark Universe on Twitter as well. So shout out to Numa for saying that one.
Smart.
Akshay for saying it. Ben Friel and Cameron, who's at ATruxCP. So thanks, guys, for writing that in. Seems like lots of people agree with the Dark Universe because, yeah, just a weird move. I thought, you know what, I'm going to say something in his favor. I quite liked Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He was obviously getting set up to be the Nick Fury of the entire thing. But obviously, yeah, if you go and like, I watched the Wolfman last week. They were having a 4K steelbook sale on it, so I thought I'll pick that up. Got it, watched it, classic. Started looking at all the other Wolfman movies, like Wolfman vs Frankenstein and stuff. I thought, let's go, baby! I'm about to start. I'm sick of all these other shared universes. This is my new hobby for the next 2 years. And yeah, it's insane that they try to make it like a superhero movie, and I think it's the perfect example of putting the cart before the horse. Where David Goyer actually recently talked about Warner Brothers, who I'm sure will come up in this
Oh
discussion.
yeah.
But he said when they were making Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and stuff that they got called into the office and they're like, "We've planned out the next 20 years of films," and it's like, mate, you've just had like you've got one. Just make one first, and yeah, see how that does. And yeah, all the stuff they did, announcing the stars and people that were going to be a part of it, it was insane. It's just such a bad move by them, and this was at a time when every single studio was announcing their big shared universe thing, and I think Marvel's the only one who've actually really pulled it off. Obviously, the MonsterVerse has done pretty well financially, yeah, but critically, I'm not sure those films are that beloved. But yeah, what's your next point?
I got to give credit to the Conjuring universe.
True,
They
true.
get a lot of shade, the Conjuring universe. They do, but they have some pretty good ones in there. You know, Conjuring films themselves. I think a couple of those Annabelle movies are pretty damn good. Um, I've heard the Nun 2 is at least an improvement over the first Nun movie. I haven't seen the Nun 2. So I think that the Conjuring universe is one that surprisingly and they've all done well, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's one that we often forget is like that is actually a cinematic universe that is technically thriving. And
Yeah,
yeah, they pulled it off, man. They really pulled it off. But the other one that came to mind for because a lot of these are just like personal picks, and a lot of them are more like is yeah, we could look at ones that are obvious financial losses for things that are for stuff they shouldn't have done or casting choices and whatnot. I was thinking of ones that just sort of sprang to mind that sort of just clicked with me. And I think the movie Solo a lot comes back to me for that because of this being one of the dumb decisions. Because you know Phil Lord and Chris Miller were directing that movie. They got fired from it and you really feel like they probably could have gotten something special from it. And that's like the big story that a lot of people focus on. And I I started remembering when we were thinking about this topic was that it also failed at the box office, and I was trying to remember like what happened then, and it came to me that oh yeah, they released it just like a few short months after the Last Jedi with almost like very little promotion too. So it cost like them a shit ton. Like firing Lord and Miller robbed it of whatever could have made it feel special and unique, right? I just automatically believe that whatever the version they had is better. I don't even care to really. I could be 100% wrong. I'll never know. My mind just tells me it's Phil Lord and Chris Miller. They tend to do something unique and weird, and it tends to connect with audiences. So I'm going to just believe that they didn't understand that what they were doing would have been something special, because they also clearly respect fandom. They also clearly respect legacy and lineage and whatnot. They know what is special about the properties they work on for audiences. They let that shine, but they also understand bringing something unique and special. So firing them, first big mistake, and then all the reshoots that they had to do cost them a shit ton of money. And then they decide to just release it with very little promotion afterwards. And then it just tanks at the box office when we didn't have time to. It's like you, again, it was even it's under Disney, and it seemed like they were trying to just, we need to do the Marvel thing and just try to get like 2 to 3 movies out a year. Just like get that going, when before there was it was like Force Awakens one year, next year Rogue One, next year Last Jedi, and then just a few months later they released Solo, a Star Wars story, and it tanked at the box office. So I think the entire handling of that just went to shit, and it does diminish quite a bit of the anticipation for whatever this Lando project is. I think there's a lot of Star Wars here that you could probably dissect, because when you're thinking about Star Wars, obviously the first order of business they should have done, haha, no pun intended, the first order of business they should have done was really get a plan and order for their new trilogy for bringing stuff back. It is still, it still ripples through the cinematic universe. Even when watching Ahsoka, that you can hear it within the fandom of, are they just, I hope they're not just trying to make it make sense of how the First Order came to rise and how Palpatine returned. I hope we're not dealing with that.
Yeah.
I hope we can just ignore that and get a new plot that could still feel consequential and not just about tying into whatever that mess was, because it was a mess. It was a mess. I'm not even speaking to like if you loved Last Jedi or not. Obviously that's a fight that wages on till the end of time. I think that if they just had some type of direction, because it's like Last Jedi, Rian Johnson has talked about, like, yeah, they didn't tell me what, so I just made it what I wanted to be. And then Rise of Skywalker was the biggest reactionary piece of content you can imagine.
Yes,
So they
so
really
bad.
botched that.
I can see why people would like Last Jedi. And in the cinema, right, I hated it. I hated it up until the point where they do the hold on maneuver. And then I feel it kicks off a bit, and there's some good action scenes and stuff, and some nice surprises with the Luke. I know
Luke
everyone kind
protection.
of everyone gets annoyed at that. The first time watching it, I was like, they got me. That was an alright thing. Second watch, I was like, that's not that good. But yeah, at least it had like a story and rules and stuff. Whereas I feel the Rise of Skywalker, and genuinely one of the worst things I ever think that a studio's done is somehow Palpatine returned. Just no explanation, no setup to it, completely out the blue. Absolutely, you can watch The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and there's nothing in that sets up Palpatine's back. They announced it on Fortnite, had that hologram out, and just somehow Palpatine returned. Just sums up the entire film, where it's like, we don't know how we're going to explain this, mate. Just throw a line in about it. Somehow he returned. What do you mean somehow? Cloning, for survived the Death Star. Somehow, mate. Don't worry about it. He's back.
They don't even strike a mood with it. That line. They don't even attempt to like have some type of ominous mystery behind it. It's so throwaway when he says it. Somehow Palpatine returned. It's not like a punch slow zoom in and like somehow Palpatine returned. There's no aura to it.
Like the characters don't really discover it themselves. Kylo discovers it, and for Poe to be the one who delivers it. I mean, if it was Leia or Luke had been alive or something, or even Luke as a Force ghost had have said it, I'd be like, okay, like Luke had been like, oh, I've died, but I dived into the Force and I tried to look for Palpatine's echo amongst the cosmos, but I couldn't find it. That
Yeah.
means he's still alive, and
Yeah.
I found part of you, Ray. His essence is in you. You are a Palpatine. That's better than somehow Palpatine returned. And every time, like they spend like when they were spending ages bringing Thrawn back into Ahsoka, all the time, like on Slack, me and the editors, we were just joking about how they could just explain it away by just saying somehow Palpatine returned. But I think Lucasfilm in general have had so many blunders. Obviously, they've hired so many directors. D&D, Josh Trank, um, who Patty Jenkins, Taika Waititi's movie might get made, but I wouldn't bet the house on it. There's been so many things, and even just doing the Ryan Johnson trilogy as well, and even just spending $300 million on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, they just seem to be they love burning money over at
No.
Lucasfilm, and I wish I could get a job over there. Be like, what ideas you got, Paul? Oh, Willow, that's another example. Made the Disney Plus show Willow and then scrapped it 6 months later. And yeah, lots of things going on there. I still think though they have made some good stuff. And yeah, they've done some good things. So the goodwill from me at least is still there. But sometimes when they announce stuff, I just think, what the hell are you doing? Now, another studio that causes a lot of issues, and this get Warner Brothers, I mean, they got brought up so much, and just their handling of the DCEU
Oh my God. Yeah.
from the off, it was pretty much trying to catch it with Marvel. They wanted their MCU and they didn't care how quickly they got there, how botched it was, just set these heroes up. And they obviously forced half an hour to be cut out of Batman v Superman. And then Suicide Squad was completely taken out of David Ayer's hands and cut by a trailer company, completely messed up the tone of what he was originally going for, basically turned it into a music video, took his soulful, um, introspective superhero movie and tried to turn it into Deadpool and Guardians of the Galaxy. And from then, I don't think they've ever fully recovered. Obviously, Justice League. I mean, you could spend 3 hours on a podcast talking about all the mishaps with that. The CGI mustache. I don't. They're releasing that is insane in that state. And just since then, they've never really managed to recuperate. They've the way they've gone on with the Snyder fans, and it's like we think you guys are all scumbags, but here's your movie. But by the way, there's not going to be anything more after this, and it's just insane. And they've had so many false starts and management changing behind the scenes in directions, bringing Henry Cavill back for the end of Black Adam, telling The Rock there's going to be a big Black Adam verse, and then the next
Yeah.
week being like, "Oh no, sorry mate, you're out completely." And even now, you can still kind of feel the footprints of it. And I actually
Oh
saw
my
this week
God.
that
Dude. Yeah.
Blue Beetle is the lowest grossing DCEU film of all time, and we've just had this constant downward spiral. And I think they completely killed all the goodwill with the fans there. I know I constantly bang on about the DCU and people get fed up of it. I mean, if you're playing a drinking game and you've been listening to this podcast and me slagging off the DCU, you're probably dead right now. But yeah, lots of weird things that Warner Brothers have done in general with that property, and to think that they've got all their characters and they're still fumbling the ball 10 years later after doing Man of Steel. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, we this topic is often looking at past decisions in movies, whereas with DC, it's kind of like an ongoing thing,
Yeah.
like there's been so much negativity that has happened from just James Gunn, and like that's very recent news of James Gunn prematurely announcing all these changes before they've had
Now,
a chance for all this stuff to be released. Warner Brothers had other movies too, where it's just
yeah, so I was just about to say that. So, Michael J at Let's Talk Mets, he said WB putting all their 2021 movie releases on HBO Max same day as theaters cost them Nolan, who would obviously go on to make close to $1 billion with Oppenheimer at the moment. And yeah, just the amount of money they lost by doing that, absolutely insane. Just crazy decision to drop it. I mean, I'm not me, but I knew someone who wasn't even going to the theater, and they were just getting 4K versions of movies that had just come out that day and watching them. And yeah, what an insane thing to do! Just asking to give away money and lose all that. Obviously, I get, it was during the pandemic and people didn't exactly know what movie theaters were going to be like and how to even handle releasing content in a time like that. But wow,
It was also a
what a
desperate
bloody
attempt.
misfire!
It was this desperate attempt for streaming war success, man. It was embarrassing. I mean, good for us. It helped us for content, like on our end. As a YouTuber, amazing. But it did. I think that more than anything else negatively affected the feelings of audiences' desire to truly go to the theaters. Being much more selective. Imagine all those movies. See, I think at least with Disney Plus, they were like, you'll still have to pay to watch Mulan. You'll still have to pay to watch Black Widow, the PVOD. But when you just drop it on a streaming service, it robs it of feeling like a cinematic experience. It does. Something that where you have to go to the theaters to witness this. And while some movies like Dune did still do pretty well, Godzilla versus Kong still did do pretty well in the actual theaters. A lot of those movies ended up being considered flops due to it being released on streaming on HBO Max. And I think that program that conditioned people in a certain way. And I still think that effect is really felt. Like while we had some massive successes this year, things like Super Mario Brothers, things like Barbie, Oppenheimer, the fight to get people consistently going to the theaters, that the thing is about consistency. It makes sense to me why we also get some of the biggest flops. We've like this year has been like terrible for Disney, absolutely terrible for Disney. And while we're talking about this was Warner Brothers' decision, Disney being in compliance, like Universal, I think the only thing they really dropped was, if I'm not mistaken, the thing they dropped was just Trolls World Tour, but everything else they did reserve for the cinema. And it's shocking to think like, oh, it's still a couple years and you could still see the ripple effect of it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I mean, they completely changed viewing habits and killed off such a massive amount of money for themselves by doing this and affecting people's behavior to where they now just wait for streaming for a lot of titles. And in the same way, people don't really buy physical media anymore. That's all because of streaming and how much they've lent into this thing that's constantly losing their money. And it's like, bruh, what a dumb decision. Now I'm just looking on RollingStone.com. They've got some They've actually got a list of the 50 worst decisions in movie history. Some funny ones here. Jar Jar Binks, and just talking about how George Lucas came back with Star Wars and launched it with Jar Jar Binks, and it wasn't well loved at the time. They also talk about Gus Van Sant creating a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, which if have you ever watched that shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, the '90s remake of it?
Mm-hmm.
It's mental to watch because it's the exact same film. Like everything is exactly the same, but it's in color with different actors, and you just think, why have you made this movie? The original is still there.
There's slight differences, like tiny bits of nudity that you actually see, and
Okay.
they enhance a tiny bit of sexual stuff. I'll say
Mhm.
that's I want to point. I want to be that guy, Paul. I want to be that guy.
Okay.
I want to be the guy who
Naturally.
gets so pedantic about it and just I'm like, well, technically they changed this, so they did change
Yeah.
it a tiny bit, but no, 99% of it is shot for shot.
Number 5 on this list, Matt Damon turning down Avatar, including 10% of the back end. So obviously, I mean, throughout history, we know lots of actors have turned down big roles. For example, I think Sean Connery turned down Lord of the Rings playing Gandalf
Will
because he didn't
Smith,
quite understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Will Smith obviously turned down Neo from The Matrix. He has gone on to say that Keanu Reeves was perfect. I mean, Keanu Reeves was born for that role.
Yeah.
You can't imagine anyone else as Neo. And yeah, but he would have made a lot of money off that. And obviously his wife starred in the second and third one and fourth one as well.
Mm.
But yeah, in 2000s, Matt Damon had the opportunity when James Cameron approached him about playing the lead role in Avatar. He was offered 10% on the back end as an enticement. The only problem was it conflicted with his work on the Bourne movie. So Damon basically said, you know, he didn't want to leave that movie early and leave them in the lurch. So he didn't do it. And the decision cost him $250 million. Throughout the years, Damon has talked about this several times, but Cameron feels he needs to let it go.
God, I
Cameron
couldn't.
said he's beating himself up over this. I really think, you know, Matt, you're kind of like one of the biggest movie stars in the world.
Doesn't matter. There's always more. There's always
Get
more.
over it.
If there's more, you
Yeah.
hate it. The
Number 4 is go on.
I don't know if it's on the Rolling Stone list. Wait, what's number 4? Is this because there's one
Will
that I
Smith
really
slap.
the Will Smith? Yes, that is one of the worst
Yeah.
decisions in Hollywood history. Is that really on here? I don't know if that's like a Hollywood decision. I think the stupid decision was the security being like, he's probably just going up there for a joke. It's probably just going to be funny.
Well, no, but you wouldn't expect it. Like I
Yeah,
remember I
yeah.
went to bed and I woke up and there were tweets about it saying,
I watched it live,
like,
man. I didn't think it was real. It was
I
live
think it
though.
was. I think it was Ryan Airy actually predicted it, judging by his timeline. So he said, "Oh, like one of the tweets was, oh God, he's gonna go up there," and then the next tweet was like, "No freaking way." So he predicted that he was gonna go up there. But I woke up the next day and I seen just I genuinely couldn't believe it was one of those things. I was reading it thinking, they're having a laugh. Like they're making a joke about how boring the Oscars was because all the tweets were like, "Oh, this is so boring. Someone needs to slap." Like, you know what I mean? Oh, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then yeah, for to actually see it,
Yeah,
obviously he still won the award that night. He got applauded and stuff, but it's something that's going to hang over his head for all the way until the end of his career. And even now, I feel like I don't give a shit if he slapped him. Like, I really don't care. I'll watch a Will Smith movie tomorrow. Like, I get it, obviously not the way you could act, but I mean, the guy's apologized. We haven't all been at the Oscars, but you know, we've lost our cool over stuff and done something stupid. It just happened to be in front of millions of people worldwide at a prestigious event that he's been working towards for his entire life. But I don't give a shit about it. But probably get hate for saying that. But obviously don't hit people yet, guys out there. Don't rush on stage and hit stand-up comedians. But yeah, having that at number 4 when the John Landis thing is actually, I think it's number 7 on the list. In case you don't know, John, we talked about it earlier, but
damn,
yeah,
that's crazy how
I
that is.
think that's probably worse than the
That's
Will
so much
Smith slap.
worse. That is so much
Yeah.
worse.
Number
Jesus.
3 is Blockbuster gets an offer to buy Netflix for $50 million in 2000 and turns it down. Yeah, completely wiped it out. Number 2, Burt Reynolds turns down James Bond, The Godfather, Star Wars, Pretty Woman, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's like an insane amount. Imagine if you had that in your filmography, all those films. And
Um,
number 1 is racist movie The Conqueror gives its cast cancer and
that is
probably
a
kills
gnarly
John
one.
Wayne. Yeah, that's insane.
The one that the one of the ones there's two that come to mind for me right away that I want to make sure to touch on. Um, the first one, I don't know. I actually don't know how you feel about this one. I feel like one you'll probably be on the same page as me, and there's the other one where I'm not sure how you'll feel. I'll go with the one where I'm not sure how you feel. Uh, the fact that they didn't do the Alien sequel with Neil Blomkamp, who I think would have been a perfect fit for it, with Sigourney Weaver and bringing back Michael Biehn as well to do that proper Alien sequel. And I feel like that would have been much more enticing, interesting than Alien Covenant, which killed that prequel franchise of the Prometheus universe or whatever they were doing. Uh, that that to me is a really big disappointment. And so it's not really like the one of the worst decisions in Hollywood, I'd say. I feel like actually the decisions that they made for Alien 3, I would probably put up there as some of the worst decisions they've done in Hollywood. The other one is more of like a wish that I think would have panned out better is they turned The Hobbit, this really tight book, into a trilogy. And originally they wanted Guillermo del Toro to do it, and Guillermo del Toro was on board to do it. And I don't remember all the reasons why Guillermo del Toro couldn't do it. I'm sure there was a
Couldn't
big.
be asked.
I'm sorry.
But he couldn't be bothered probably.
I
It's
mean,
like 3 3-hour movies. Sod that, I'm off.
he wanted to just to make it a two-parter, 2 movies, and I think Guillermo del Toro would have brought something different instead of feeling like another Lord of the Rings, but a discount version, you know? And I know there's a lot working against Peter Jackson on that one. It seemed like it really destroyed him to have like your greatest trilogy, your biggest passion project ever, and then to do the Hobbit trilogy. Like everything about the way the Hobbit went down just sounds like a nightmare. You even have that footage that went out of Ian McKellen like breaking down on set about how the acting experience was going. So the entire development of the Hobbit movies, I think, was some just terrible decision making. Just the concept of turning it into a trilogy, which is not a smart call to me. And I think Guillermo del Toro's version would have helped distinguish it from. I think it would have been enough to make it feel in the same universe as the Lord of the Rings one, but still distinguish it and give you something different and have more of that fantastical wonder that Del Toro can bring to his films. And I think if the Hobbit movies went down better, that would have helped aid in the interest and possibly the way the development went down of Rings of Power as well. If Rings of Power would still be the thing that they would decide to do ultimately, because it's
I
like
mean, yeah.
you do the trilogy, and the trilogy is great of Lord of the Rings, and then they followed up with the Hobbit films, which does damage like goodwill with your audience for the Lord of the Rings universe that you are building out.
Yeah, I actually quite like. Well, I don't want to say like. Like's a strong word. I am entertained by the Hobbit trilogy. Obviously I know it's not as good, but whenever I'm starting a Lord of the Rings watch through, I'll just build up to it, put it on in the background, let it play out. It has some funny moments, some good characters in it, but yeah, they did drag it out. It shouldn't have been like 3 3-hour movies or whatever it was. Yeah, that's, and obviously you could argue that Amazon paying 1 billion to make that Lord of the Rings TV show was a crazy, 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 insane. But yeah, that have you got any more there?
Nah,
An
man.
interesting one I read that was talking about. This comes directly from Homeboy. Well, this will be the last one,
Sweet.
and then we'll turn it over to you guys to talk about it. So, John, cool goofball. So he was saying that during the Disney takeover with Fox buying all the stuff, they basically shot Mr. Sinister footage, shelved it, had tons of X-Force scripts ready to go, shelved it, and yeah, apparently there was lots of X-Men projects that we would have had, but Disney took over and shelved it. Now, I don't think that's up there with like some of the most controversial things we've skirted around on this, but yeah, we're obviously open to hear you guys. I'm sure you've got loads of things going through your head right now, thinking, "Oh, what was that? They should never have done that. They should never have made the." I'm trying to think of a good one. The
You know what they should have done? They shouldn't have done another Phoenix attempt in the X-Men universe with making it
with
Simon
the same
Kinberg's
guy.
directorial debut. The same
Oh,
guy who wrote X-Men: The Last Stand. That is
yeah.
that is not a smart call. I mean, he's done a lot of great work in the X-Men universe, but we're like, we definitely know that there's maybe you shouldn't have him do this one as a
How did he
directorial
mess it
debut.
up?
Bro.
How did he mess it up again?
I
Like,
know.
how do you get given the same thing and you still get it wrong? I don't
It's
know.
like that is redemption moment, man. This is where you redeem yourself, and
Yeah.
that was not that
So,
that was a slog.
so yeah, just let us know your thoughts because I'm sure you got lots of stuff going around your head right now that we've missed out. Don't just write stuff like Harvey Weinstein. Obviously, it's bad.
Harvey Weinstein, worst decision Hollywood made.
Yeah, obviously, top stupid stuff like what we've just said there, like Dark Phoenix films. But keep it lighthearted, guys. We're trying to make a fun podcast here, and leave your thoughts on what you think some dumb decisions in Hollywood are. Would love to hear from you. I'm sure you're going to be typing away right now saying we're haters and shills. But pause that for a second and just write what a dumb
Yeah.
decision is. And yeah, thanks as always for checking us out. If you want to buy some merch, it's just below the video. If you want to support us on Spotify, go over there, across the Spoilerverse, Amazon Music. Hopefully next week my voice is back to normal. Or write in the comments if you want me to keep getting viruses, and I'll do it for you guys. But yeah, thanks for sitting with us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Greg, for joining me.
Of
Much love.
course.